It's Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. Today we've got Ray Fittipaldo. I want to talk about Steelers minicamp now that it is over. Aaron Rodgers didn't participate in team drills, but we did learn a decent bit about him and DK Metcalf and how their instant impact on the offense is going heading into training camp in a month and a half. Plus, we'll talk about the TJ Watt contract situation, what Mike Tomlin said about that, and a look at the 2023 draft class and how they feel camaraderie amongst themselves. We'll talk about all that here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're your Steelers writers, and as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as daily content that comes out from all of our writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Not only will they help you when you're injured in an accident, they'll also help you with workers' compensation. Call Edgar Snyder Associates today at 1-800-9 for Edgar, because there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, let's talk about let's talk about Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf, because clearly they're the two guys that are going to change the most on offense. Big additions, a four-time MVP in Rodgers and a Pro Bowl wide receiver in DK Metcalf, who's big, fast, and before we get into the leadership aspects of it, I did think it was interesting. DK Metcalf practiced all week in minicamp after passing up on OTAs. Aaron Rodgers practiced, but never with the whole team. What did you make of that, and him saying that was a Mike Tomlin decision to let him get acclimated to things?
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit interesting. I guess there's one school of thought, Chris, where maybe, you want to throw Aaron Rodgers into the fire and just see how he picks it up. But I certainly understand where Mike Tomlin was coming from by just having him sit back and watch and, learn the plays. We were watching practice, and Aaron had the helmet up to his ear. He was listening to Arthur Smith call the plays. He was often standing next to Arthur Smith on the practice field. So clearly he doesn't have a great grasp of the playbook now on June 13th, but Mike Tomlin also said he was very confident in these 6 weeks before they report on July 23rd that Aaron will have a full grasp of the playbook. So, yeah, it's going to take some time. I guess it was a little bit of a big ask for him to walk in here and learn everything in a day or two. So, Aaron and DK and all those guys also talked about getting together in Malibu, California for some throwing sessions, and I think that's also going to include those guys getting Aaron up to speed on the playbook and just some of the nuances of Arthur Smith's offense.
And that's part of it, the terminology. That's the DK Metcalf also acknowledged that he's working on right now, is learning the terminology. And the terminology isn't like vastly different everywhere, that there's all these whole new concepts. It's just often like, hey, what we called a drive passing concept or a smash concept might be called something different where he was in New York, or what switch that they wanted to, when they call out a different personnel group, there might be a certain lingo that Arthur Smith has in his offense that the Steelers have versus what the Jets have. And so it for the sake of fluidity, I think into the team practices, they probably just let Aaron Rodgers just do, just kind of watch, take it in. And again, like Aaron Rodgers, he's 41 years old. He once he learns the offense, once he understands where the ball, like him needing to do reps is like the last thing. So it's just like get him physically warmed up, get his body attuned to things, but then let training camp be that time once he does have that terminology down, and that's what you expect of him being that kind of a player. But I also thought it was interesting, Ray, how when we talked to both of these guys, Rodgers and Metcalf, neither of them seemed to feel like their job was to take things over, was to change the whole organization, even though like these are two huge additions to the team. Like, Metcalf is the biggest wide receiver this team has probably had, since Antonio Brown. as far as like, profile, what he can do to, I mean, he's now getting paid, one of the most, the most money. And Aaron Rodgers is a 4-time MVP. But when we talked to Aaron Rodgers, he said, quote unquote, I want to be a servant leader. He didn't, when I asked about his leadership and what's being asked of him, and he's basically saying he doesn't want to be the guy that says everyone has to do what I say. He's kind of being like, hey, if someone wants my advice, I'll give it. And I'll do it, and I'll set the tone as a lead by example guy. But I'm not here to reconstruct everything. I mean, because they have their structures in place. And DK Metcalf even said a similar thing about the wide receiver room, saying like, hey, Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin are good receivers in their own right. They have good skill sets, and I'm impressed by them. And he's like, if they want my advice, I'm more than happy to give it. But I also respect like they have their process. And I think it was a kind of a mature approach from both guys. Granted, one guy's been in the NFL for 2 decades. The other guy's been in the NFL for 7 years. So you'd expect maturity. But I think that's part of why the Steelers made the switch to get guys like these in their offensive room.
Yeah, I think training camp is going to be big, Chris, for the formation of leadership for this 2025 Steelers team. And listen, it's tough to come in and be a new guy and be this rah type of leader and be very vocal if you're not there, right? Like Aaron Rodgers just showed up on Monday. So it would be unnatural for him to come in and be a vocal leader. I don't think that's necessarily his style anyway. And I think that applies to DK Metcalf as well. DK was here for some of the lifting and conditioning early in the process, but then he was not there for the 2 voluntary weeks of OTAs. And then he showed up again, of course, for minicamp this week. So I think a lot of that stuff is going to take place at training camp. And Chris, that's one of the reasons Mike Tomlin loves going away to Latrobe. I think they're just one of a handful of teams now that actually goes away for training camp. And you can't really recreate that atmosphere of living in the dorms and, shooting the breeze at night and just getting to know your teammates. I think that's where a lot of the guys on the team will get to know Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf. And I think naturally the leadership will come, throughout that process.
And I think that the leadership being more mature is a part of what they really need across the board. I'll give an example of a stark difference that I'm writing about. It'll be in an article that comes out later today. But on the first day of minicamp, Joey Porter Jr., third-year cornerback, who's gone against DK Metcalf. Like, he did a pretty good job against him his rookie year when the Steelers faced the Seahawks. They faced off against each other, and there was a play where, and I asked both of them about it so I can talk about it, but Joey Porter Jr. got called for defensive holding in the red zone on DK Metcalf. Porter thinks he was like, hey, he was pushing me. Like, didn't you see that? He was talking to the referee, and Metcalf came over and was like, hey, man, like, I actually did this intentionally to get that out, to get that response from you. As far as like, he's like, I went to look up like I was run blocking, and then I had a yard, and then you got that reaction out of you. And Joey Porter Jr. was like, oh, and afterwards there wasn't an argument for Porter. He was just like, oh, now I understand what you were doing there. Thank you. And they shook hands and then went about their business. And it's like, that was a moment where DK Metcalf, if that was George Pickens, he's probably pointing and laughing at Joey Porter Jr. We saw him all the time. How many times did you see Ray Fittipaldo over the last 2 years where he would just drop the ball in Porter's face if he caught it over him? Right. And the two obviously never got along. And, even when Porter did something good in the game, I remember Pickens not like saying his name. It was pretty wild. But DK Metcalf here in a moment of maturity is like, hey, helping his fellow cornerback get better at his job, and without chastising and being like, hey, this is what I'm doing here. I think that's stuff that can help the culture of a locker room when it's like, hey, there's no animosity. We are competing with each other. We want to beat each other in practice because we want to prove that we're the best, but we're here to help each other. And that's a sense of connectivity that maybe wasn't there with the Steelers before with guys like George Pickens and others.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And sometimes management and coaches have a say-so in how that leadership does form. And just eliminating a guy like George Pickens from that can really be, something that's beneficial for the team, because you look at it, whether you like it or not, Chris, leadership takes place in different forms. Whether you like it or not, George Pickens was one of the senior receivers in that room last year. So I think a lot of people did look to him to leadership, and it just wasn't there. I think with DK, whether he's vocal or not, whether Aaron is vocal or not, you lead through example a lot of times too. And DK Metcalf, he's going to be a good leader in that respect. He's always going to give 110% effort on the field. So I think some ways, leadership can come through just watching other guys, watching how those guys go about their business. So it doesn't have to be vocal all the time. Sometimes the younger guys on this team just have to watch guys like DK, how they do their jobs, and then they learn from that.
Absolutely. While those two leaders were present and guys, we expect to step into leadership roles for the Steelers. One guy who is one of the biggest leaders on the team didn't show up for minicamp, and that's TJ Watt. Mike Tomlin talked about his contract situation. We'll give you our thoughts on that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Fittipaldo. But first, what remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Do they also help with workers' compensation? When you've been hurt on the job, you need to know who decides when you're better, who decides when your treatment's over, and who decides when your benefits are over. The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. How does that make you feel? The answer should be not great, because they're not going to be on your side. So get someone who will be on your side. That's Edgar Snyder Associates. You can call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR, because they'll fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve. Again, that's Edgar Snyder Associates at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Fittipaldo. Ray, Mike Tomlin spoke yesterday at the end of minicamp addressing the TJ Watt contract situation, saying, quote, "I'm optimistic we're going to get things done because we got two sides that want to get things done. When that's going to occur, I do not know." That's interesting. And I guess, what is Mike Tomlin to say right now that the best player on his team isn't in minicamp? Obviously wants a new contract or no extension soon. But at the same time, he acknowledged he's been in constant contact with TJ throughout the process. We talked to Denzel Martin, the outside linebackers coach, for the Steelers. He's been in constant contact with TJ Watt. Alex Highsmith said the same thing. So it's not like TJ Watt is shutting out the Steelers right now, but clearly there's a different approach. But something that you pointed out is that different approach kind of mirrors something that's happening across the league.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at guys like Terry McLaurin in Washington, held out of minicamp. Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati did the same, and many others throughout the league. It's just the way that agents want to try to regain some leverage in negotiations this time around. So we'll see if it works or not. I think for the Steelers, what fans want to watch in July, assuming a contract doesn't get done between now and then, is, does TJ show up for training camp? I think that's going to be important. We've had Cam Hayward do the hold in, TJ do the hold in, Deontay do the hold in, and honestly, there weren't many distractions. They're out there, they're watching, they're being good teammates. But if you have a situation where TJ doesn't show up, I think naturally it's going to feel more like when Le'Veon Bell didn't show up in 2017, in 2018. I know they're vastly different circumstances. There was a tag involved with Le'Veon that he didn't like, but it just creates a different dynamic when one of your top leaders is not present at training camp. So we'll see how it unfolds. I'm not sure what TJ and his agents are thinking right now, but I think that's something to watch for July 23rd on report day.
It certainly will be. I mean, look, TJ Watt has been a guy that's been team first. He said several times he wants to retire a Steeler. He wants to never play for any coach not named Mike Tomlin. I think that there is, like, Mike Tomlin does bring good, like both sides want to get the deal done. Now, what is the in between? What are the Steelers offering him versus what does he want? And what's going to get in the way of that? And when is that going to be resolved? Will he hold out going to training camp? Like you say, when they report on July 23rd, will he be there? Because another thing, the Steelers don't negotiate with players and their agents when they're not with the team. So if TJ Watt wants to get a deal done, he'll have to do what every other Steeler has always done, and that's show up, and then they get a deal done. And so I personally think that's what's going to happen. And, I think there could also be something behind, he just had his first daughter in March. And so maybe he's taking this time to just be a dad and not have to worry about football because he's TJ Watt and he's really good at his job. And that training camp is when he'll get acclimated to things, but he's still working out in his own time. So and I'm not presuming that that's what it is. I'm just saying that there's probably lots of factors there right now. But I think the bottom line, though, is that I think the Steelers are in a better place then people might give them credit for, because they have a track record with TJ Watt. They've made him the most expensive edge rusher in the NFL before, and they could very well do so for a brief period of time, because Michael Parsons and Aiden Hutchinson are getting their contracts, and those guys are basically entering the portion of their careers where TJ Watt got his first contract.
Right.
They're going to make more money naturally, but if they get the contract with Watt done soon, I could see something like that happen, where he gets $41 million, and then Hutchinson and Parsons maybe get like $45 million a year with their deal. And I'm going to repeat this until everyone gets it. $41 million in today's salary cap is less than $28.5 million when TJ Watt got his first extension. So people have to understand that when we say that number, they're like, oh, that's just too much money. It's really not, when you look at how the NFL has grown and how much money it allows to be paid to players.
Yeah, fans almost have to adopt like an NFL-minded approach when you go through these negotiations. There's a football side of this, and there's a business side of this. And I think fans have to understand that if TJ doesn't show up for the first day of camp, or if he's holding in again and this thing drags on, it's not personal. He still feels the way he did on locker cleanout day, right? When, as you mentioned, he said all of those things. So it's just a part of it. And the Steelers and TJ aren't the only ones who are going through it. I would guess that, there was probably more than half the teams in the NFL right now are struggling, trying to get a contract done with one of their star players. So we'll see how it works out. But I am, no less confident that he'll be a Steeler for a long time today than I was on locker cleanout day. It just has to go through the process, and they have to go about the business side of this negotiation.
Hey, you could look inside the division and you could see a team that not only is having a hard time signing the guy that wants a new contract, but they're having a hard time signing the rookie they drafted to replace that guy. That's the Bengals. Trey Hendrickson had been saying for months that he did not appreciate how the Bengals were handling his negotiations. He didn't show up for minicamp. But now you have Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher who, you previewed him a lot during our draft process, Ray, about his freakishness, athleticism. He had a perfect 10 out of 10 relative athletic score in the draft process. Everyone's excited about him. He's the Bengals' first round pick. He held up the jersey on draft night. Everything looks amazing. He shows up to minicamp, and they're not getting a deal with him done because the Bengals reportedly, according to what people say, I'm not in tune with what's going on over there, but I'm just reading what the people who are writing about it. They want to add clauses to his contract that he says aren't normal. And he said, quote unquote, from the Bengals locker room when asked about it, he said they want to win arguments. They don't want to win. They want to win games, or they want to win arguments more than they want to win games. That is wild, Ray, for a rookie who just was the first round pick to be saying that instead of signing their contract. And then he left minicamp without signing it. Like, there's people who are writing that, like, technically, if he wanted to and he didn't sign his contract, he could enter next year's draft and just be ready to get picked all over again.
Yeah, listen, the Bengals are known for maybe, let's face it, being cheap over the years. They're probably one of the more frugal NFL franchises. So I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that this is happening with them. But I agree with you. For a rookie to come out and say that, you don't even hear veterans say that. So for a rookie to say that, I'm sure he and his agent are very unhappy with the way those contract talks are going.
That's just nuts to me. I think it's wild to think that that's going on. I knew that Trey Hendrickson was probably not going to get resolved, quietly, if at all, in Cincinnati. I did not foresee this Shamar Stewart thing happening. And so again, when you're talking about TJ Watt, at least he's not out there in the public just disparaging the Bengals the way that both Hendrickson and now Stewart are. That's when you'd have to be. I'd be a little bit more worried if I was a Steelers fan, worried about this TJ Watt contract situation. So we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, while everyone's focused on the rookies, I think it's important to focus on the group that could be the most up and coming force in the Steelers team. And it's not one specific position. It's the 2023 draft class, Omar Khan's first draft class, Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., Keeanu, Benton, and company. I talked with a few of them yesterday during minicamp, and I think there's an interesting thing to hear from them on as far as how they have expectations for them as a group. We'll talk about that next year on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carteret, Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this episode is brought to you by UFC Gym Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a way to challenge your body and sharpen your mind, step into something more than just a workout. Welcome to the brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy at UFC Gym. Here, it's not just about training. It's about living the values of honor, discipline, and respect. Whether you're a total beginner or leveling up your skills, you'll be guided through a structured program led by a third-degree black belt instructor who builds confidence, strength, flexibility, and real technique. Head down to the UFC Gym in the Waterfront or Market Square to learn about their exclusive 3-month introductory package today that's only at UFC Gym Pittsburgh. We're also brought to you by Boss. Celebrate Dad's signature style. Make this Father's Day memorable by celebrating your dad and his unique style with Boss. Whether he's a trendsetter into the classics or somewhere in between, Boss offers timeless pieces that perfectly complement his individuality. Boss Menswear has reached icon status for its tailoring, but offers more than the perfect suit. Boss is now open in the Ross Park Mall with a selection of menswear prices. Check out Boss today. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about the 2023 draft class. Of course, that was Omar Khan's first draft class. Broderick Jones was traded up for in the first round. Joey Porter Jr. selected in the second round, along with Keeanu Benton, Darnell Washington, Nick Herbig, Corey Trice, that crew. My first question was to Joey Porter Jr. about this, and I asked if there was a sense of camaraderie amongst that group, and he said, actually, yeah, like we kind of all hold each other to the standard, like we know we're next up, and we have to step into these roles, and guys do it. And Broderick Jones expanded upon that, saying that, like, yeah, like, we actually kind of have always had a really strong connection and felt a sense of responsibility. He's like they get dinners and stuff, and he said they even still do as a group because they felt like they were kind of a special unit coming in. And frankly, Ray, when I thought about like the positions that entire class is in, from Porter being CB1 for this team and learning from Metcalf and Slay, and this being an important year for him, Broderick Jones switching to left tackle, dropping 20 pounds, being ready, Keeanu Benton not losing any starting role at the nose tackle just because they drafted 2 guys at defensive tackle this year. And even Nick Herbig, who got all the starting reps in the team drills when TJ Watt was out, and Corey Trice basically being next up if Slayer Porter goes down. This is a very important class for the future of the Steelers. And while everyone's focused on Rodgers and Metcalf, I think it's this core, because it addresses several important positions, that could be the group that tells most about the 2025 Steelers.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like Washington and Herbig.
And Darnell Washington.
Yeah, I don't want to say perform better, but they've performed better in their roles than maybe Joey and Broderick have as starters, if you guys can get my point there. And maybe it's just more exposure. They're playing more snaps, Joey and Broderick, and some of their weaknesses are being exposed, while guys like Nick and Darnell are, probably playing half the game. So it is interesting how that class, is being viewed this year. I think, to me, Chris, you could talk about Keeanu Benton, Herbig, all those guys. To me, this class is going to be look back upon 5 years from now, or even 2 or 3 years from now. How did Broderick Jones do in 2023? Did they pick up the 5th-year option on his contract? To me, that's what this class is all about. I thought for a rookie, I thought he did well making the transition to the right side last year. I think everyone, including Broderick, would admit it was a disappointment. And now how does he respond in 2025, going back to the left side? It's Aaron Rodgers' blind side. He's got to do a good job. And if he doesn't, I think his long-term future in Pittsburgh, there's some doubt there.
I think that's the thing here, is that you need that to work. Because also Broderick Jones is the first like foundational stone in building the new wall of the new offensive line for the Steelers, which is supposed to be the foundation that's going to carry them into this new era that, again, we're talking about this year, but the whole point of what this year is to set up and build a foundation so that when the Steelers want to be aggressive next year and want to go get that franchise quarterback in the first round and trade up and get that guy, they're not coming into haphazard situation on offense the way kind of Kenny Pickett did, with guys like Kendrick Green and, guys rotating guards and tackles everywhere. Like, just not a great situation to have there. They need to have an established offensive line. And of all the guys that are new that have been picked in the last 3 years, you have, Broderick Jones now at left, Troy Fautanu at right, Mason McCormick at right guard, and Zach Frazier at center. Isaac Seumalo is the one like real long-term veteran of the group, but of all those guys, Broderick Jones is the one guy they traded up for, and he was the first piece that they went and got. Yeah. And yes, he's also the youngest of them, which I think is always funny to think about. But it's important for him to become that foundational piece of this offensive line. And if he does, I think it offers hope that, hey, Omar Khan's getting it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's symbolic in a lot of ways, but, Broderick being the first guy, but you have to start seeing some results this year. And I think to a lesser extent, I think we're probably talking in the same light about Joey Porter. What held Joey Porter back the last couple of years? Maybe some of those holding penalties, not getting like the nuances of what you can get away with in the NFL and what you can't. That was a big question on him coming out of college because he was very grabby at Penn State, and that was an issue for him there. So, the Steelers tried Patrick Peterson, learn from a future Hall of Famer, a year with Dante Jackson, and now we have Darius Slay again, another guy who I think is like Peterson, and maybe he can impart some wisdom to Joey. But, I think Joey has to start getting it as well. This is a really big year for Joey Porter as well.
It's a big year for all, and Keeanu Benton too, because if Keeanu Benton, is able to emerge as like a premier nose who can really change things for the Steelers, then him and Derek Harmon have a chance to be a 1-2 punch. But this is also, we're talking about these guys and these players, but this is also a huge year for Omar Khan to see these guys start to work out because, I think we forget Kevin Colbert lasted for 2 decades with the Steelers. Like that redefined things. He built things, and Omar Khan was promoted, to take that position when he was done because you thought he could bring in like the new day, and Andy Weidel also being in this mix too. If this regime is going to show that, hey, they are ushering that in the next Super Bowl window opportunity of years for the Steelers, they need these guys to start hitting because guys like TJ Watt, guys like Alex Highsmith, guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, they have propped up this team for the past few years with their big playability, their leadership, but they need their lieutenants behind them. And I think that's where these guys have to turn from the foot soldiers of the team. They occasionally get some things done and do the harder work, but turning into the consistent playmakers. And if they do that, I think that could be the story of the Pittsburgh Steelers that makes them a better team moving forward because, Aaron Rodgers can be good. DK Metcalf can be good. But if they don't get this offensive line playing at least an above average level, it's going to be for naught. If the secondary is still wondering who their cornerback of the future is, that's going to be a big problem going into next year. They need a lot of these things to solidify so they can go into next year and say, okay, we have most of our needs met. Let's get our quarterback. Let's put everything in to get it.
And Chris, to your point, let's take Washington and Herbig out of the equation because they're not full-time starters. This time next year, are the Steelers talking about second contracts with Jones? Are they doing that with Benton? And are they doing that with Porter? That's how we'll know if this is a successful draft class or not.
Absolutely. He's right, Fittipaldo. I'm Chris Carter. Thanks so much for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast. Remember, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Remember to subscribe at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. We'll be back here Monday reviewing more things that we learned from minicamp because there's a lot of notes that we have, a lot of things we haven't written yet, a lot of things that we've been delving into. We'll be peeling more of that back for you to get a better insight on the Pittsburgh Steelers right here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. See you here Monday. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.